Single dad let a homeless woman stay above his cafe. Then her billionaire secret came out. Why did a single dad let a homeless woman stay above his cafe? And what could possibly connect her to a billionaire secret? Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy emotional stories filled with unexpected turns and powerful human connections, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thank you so much for being here, for watching, and for supporting our channel. Your support means more than you know. Now, let us know in the comments. Would you ever let a homeless stranger stay above your cafe if you had the chance to help them? With that question in mind, let's step into this story and discover how it all began. A woman in a torn blue coat swayed on his fire escape, one step from the alley below. Ben Alvarez heard the metal rattle above the espresso machine and looked up so fast he nearly dropped a mug. Steam hissed. Cups clinked. Somewhere near the front window, a customer laughed at something on his phone, unaware that a human life was slipping outside the second-floor railing. He was already moving. The back door slammed open. Cold brick air hit his face. He reached the alley just as the woman's hand lost its grip on the rusted bar. Her knuckles were white. Her shoes were split at the toes. A plastic grocery bag hung from one wrist, stretched thin with everything she still owned. "Don't look down," Ben said. She did not answer. "Take my hand." Still nothing. Then her fingers slipped again. Ben climbed the iron stairs 2 at a time, apron strings snapping behind him. The metal groaned under his boots. Grease from the kitchen still warmed his sleeves, but the railing bit cold into his palm. When he reached her, he did not grab wildly. He set one hand against the rail, the other toward her, steady and open, as if dignity could be offered before rescue. "Your bag first," he said quietly. "Then you." That made her look at him. Her face was drawn, sharp with exhaustion, but not empty. Her eyes were alert in a way that did not match the coat, the frayed scarf, the nights on concrete. She let him take the bag. Then, after one long second that seemed to test more than his balance, she placed her hand in his. He pulled. The fire escape shrieked. Her shoe scraped metal. His shoulder slammed the rail hard enough to bruise. But he got her over. For a moment, they both sat on the landing, breathing against the old red brick wall while the smell of roasted coffee drifted up from the vent below. Her wrist trembled in his hand. He let go first. No questions. Inside the cafe, milk foamed, a blender buzzed, and life kept pretending not to notice. Ben stood and offered his hand again, this time not to save her life, but to let her keep what was left of herself. "You can warm up downstairs," he said. She looked past him toward the alley mouth. A Blacktown car had paused at the curb for half a second, too polished for that block, then rolled on. Her shoulders tightened. "I can't stay in public," she said. Her voice was low, educated, careful. Ben noticed that. He also noticed she was shivering hard enough to hide it. He led her through the upstairs hallway instead, past stacked flower boxes and the old office no one used anymore. Above the cafe was a narrow apartment with one working lamp, a sink that rattled when the pipes kicked on, and a fold-out bed he kept for nights when closing turned into opening. The place smelled faintly of detergent, old wood, and cinnamon from the bakery vents below. His 8-year-old daughter, Lucy, sat at the small table coloring on the back of a supply invoice. She looked up, took in the stranger, and said nothing at first. Just watched with that child's clear, unsettling honesty. Ben crouched beside her. "She needs tea," Lucy whispered, as if this had already been decided somewhere kinder than logic. Ben smiled once. "Yeah, she does." The woman remained near the door, one hand still clutching the broken grocery bag. She studied the room too carefully. Window, stairwell, second exit, phone on the counter. It was the look of someone measuring danger, not comfort. "I'm Claire," she said at last. Ben nodded, though something in the pause made him wonder if the name had been chosen rather than given. He did not press. "Grace, when it is real, does not pry." He set water to boil. Lucy slid a box of crackers across the table without being asked. Claire stared at the small gesture as though it cost more than the room. Then the knock came. Not polite. The second knock rattled the warped glass harder than the first, sharp enough to make the teaspoons tremble in their saucers. Rain tapped the front windows. The cafe smelled of burnt espresso, old wood, and the clean steam rising from the kettle. Upstairs, the little room waited in silence. Down here, trouble had arrived with wet shoes and no patience. Claire did not flinch. That was the first strange thing. Most people in her position would have looked afraid, or embarrassed, or grateful enough to hide behind someone else's kindness. Instead, she set the cracker down with careful fingers and turned her head toward the door as if she had been expecting this sound all evening. Not fear. Calculation. Lucy looked from the door to Claire. Do you know them? Claire's answer came a beat late. Maybe. Ethan felt the room change. Not louder. Quieter. Sometimes danger did that. It stole sound before it stole peace. Another knock. Open up. A man's voice this time. Not drunk. Not random. Controlled. The kind of control that meant he believed the building, the hour, and the people inside should all obey him. Ethan moved toward the front, but Claire stood first. Don't, she said. He stopped. That was the second strange thing. A woman who had accepted a borrowed room over a cafe should not have had that kind of command in her voice. Yet there it was, low, firm, practiced. Not a plea. An instruction. I need to handle this, Claire said. You're in my cafe, Ethan replied. So I at least get to know what's at my door. For a moment, she said nothing. Neon from the open sign painted a red line across the floor between them. Rainwater crawled down the window like shaking fingers. Then she made a choice. Not to hide. Not to run. To trust. There are people looking for me, Claire said quietly. They say they want to help. They don't. Outside, a fist hit the glass again. Lucy jumped. Ethan reached to switch off the sign, but Claire caught his wrist. No. If they think I'm cornered, they push harder. That was when the agency shifted. Until now, Ethan had been the one extending shelter, deciding what mercy looked like, carrying the moral weight of the moment. But grace, if it is honest, does not make one person forever strong and the other forever small. Claire stepped past him, drew a slow breath, and unlocked the door herself. Cold air entered first, then two men in dark raincoats. No badges, no uniforms, just polished shoes, expensive watches, and the smug stillness of men who expected doors to open because they knocked on them. The taller one glanced around the cafe with instant disgust, his eyes pausing on the cracked pastry case, the hand-lettered menu. The child's homework still spread near the sugar jars. There you are, he said to Claire, as if speaking to a runaway asset. You need to come with us. Claire stayed where she was. I said no. You are not in a position to say no. The sentence landed heavier than it sounded. Ethan stepped nearer, not blocking, not yet. If she said no, that seems pretty clear. The shorter man finally looked at him. This is private. No, Claire said, and her voice sharpened like glass. It became public the second you came here. The taller one gave a thin smile. Claire, this is getting embarrassing. Lucy gathered the cracker box against her chest and stared. Embarrassing. The word told Ethan more than any explanation could have. These were not men worried about a fragile woman sleeping over a cafe. These were men worried about control, about optics, about someone slipping beyond reach. Claire took one step forward. Tell them who sent you. Silence. Rain hissed in the gutter outside. The taller man's jaw tightened. Your family is concerned. Family. The word should have sounded warm. Instead, it chilled the room. Claire's face changed then, not into fear, but into something sadder. Recognition. Old disappointment. A wound reopening without blood. Concern doesn't arrive after midnight with lawyers' language and threats. Morning arrived with the smell of burnt sugar and floor wax. Thin gold lights slipping across the cafe windows as if the night before had been a bad dream that had chosen not to stay. Cups clinked. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, tires whispered over wet pavement. No one from the doorway returned. That silence did not erase the threat. It only left room for something gentler to enter. By 6:30, the chalkboard menu had been wiped cleaner than usual. The pastry case no longer looked tired. A jar of fresh daisies stood near the register in an empty syrup bottle, small and bright against the scratched wood. Ethan noticed each change one at a time, the way a weary man notices warmth only after his hand stops shaking. Claire was the one who had done it. Not for praise, not for leverage, simply because Dawn had found her awake. She moved through the cafe in his spare apron, the straps tied twice around her waist, her blue coat folded over the back of a chair upstairs. The sleeves were rolled. Her hair was pinned back with a plain black clip she must have found in some forgotten drawer. She handled the room with quiet care, as though respect could be laid down like table settings. You reorganized the tea shelf. It made no sense. You found the good mugs. They were hiding behind the chipped ones. A corner of his mouth lifted before he could stop it. The morning regulars noticed too. A retired mail carrier who usually grunted into his newspaper paused to say the place looked alive. A young mother with a stroller came in for one coffee and left with 2 scones after Claire knelt to hand a dropped stuffed rabbit back to her little boy, as if it were a royal gift. 2 college students, drawn first by the flowers and then by the smell of warm cinnamon, stayed long enough to order breakfast sandwiches Ethan had not planned to make. Business did not explode. Miracles rarely announced themselves with fireworks. But the register rang more often. The room stayed fuller. People lingered. And with every hour, Claire began to look less like someone passing through and more like someone the place had been waiting for. By late morning, steam fogged the front glass in soft white clouds. The espresso machine hissed. Bacon crackled from the tiny kitchen. Ethan worked the grill while Claire carried plates, refilled creamers, and somehow remembered who wanted oat milk, who hated napkins wrapped around silverware, who needed extra time before speaking. She listened the way some people pray, without interruption, without vanity. That was her gift. Not charm, not performance. Attention. A man in a wrinkled suit came in talking too loudly into an earpiece and snapping his fingers at the register before his call had even ended. The old instinct in Ethan tightened his shoulders. He had seen enough men like that to know how they treated places they thought were beneath them. Claire got there first. Her voice never rose. You can finish your call, or I can take your order. I can't do both for you. The man blinked. The room went still for one breath. Then he lowered the phone, not because she had embarrassed him, because she had spoken to him as if decency were still available to him. He ordered. He sat. He ate in silence. Before leaving, he came back to the counter and added a 20 to the tip jar without looking at either of them. Ethan saw it happen. More importantly, he saw what it did to the room. People followed the tone they were given. Under Claire's quiet steadiness, the cafe seemed to remember its own dignity. Near noon, she found an old ledger beneath the counter and opened it with the caution of someone touching another person's history. Numbers filled the pages in Ethan's cramped handwriting. Rent, milk invoices, payroll he barely made, repairs postponed another month. You've been carrying this place alone, she said. For a while. This isn't failing. He gave a tired laugh. That generous? No. The noon rush thinned into a hush made of spoon taps, refrigerator hum, and the soft hiss of steam dying in the espresso wand. Sunlight lay across the black and white tile in pale bars. The place smelled like coffee grounds, lemon soap, and old paper left too long in a drawer. Claire kept one hand on the open ledger. The other rested flat on the counter, very still. Her eyes moved down the page once more. Rent. Utilities. A cracked freezer repair pushed again into next month. Payroll met by $27 and some stubborn miracle. There was no self-pity in the numbers. Only endurance. Quiet, exact, relentless endurance. That isn't generosity, she said at last. Ethan looked up from wiping a mug. Then what is it? Dignity. The word seemed to settle into the room like dust lit by sun. For a moment, that was all. Cups drying. A truck passing outside. The tiny bell above the front door trembling without opening. Then Claire's gaze shifted past him, toward the street, and something inside her changed so quickly it chilled the air around her. Across the avenue, a black sedan sat at the curb. Engine off. Windows dark. It had not been there 10 minutes earlier. Ethan followed her line of sight. You know them? No, too fast. Her fingers slipped from the ledger. The old book hit the counter with a flat slap. She stepped back, not dramatically, not loudly, but with the sharp economy of someone whose body had learned fear before her voice ever admitted it. The sedan did not move. A man got out from the passenger side. Gray suit. No umbrella. A folder tucked under one arm. He did not enter. He only stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the apartment windows above the cafe, as if counting them. Ethan set the mug down. What kind of no was that? Claire's jaw tightened. The kind that means I need you to close the blinds. He did not ask again. He crossed to the front windows and turned the slats shut one by one. Outside light broke into thin stripes across the room. The cafe dimmed. In that striped half-shadow, Claire looked less like a tired woman borrowing shelter and more like someone who had once lived inside polished danger. When he turned back, she was already moving, not fleeing, inspecting. Back hall, rear exit, stairwell door, kitchen window latch. She checked each one with brisk, practiced hands, as if running an old drill she hated for being familiar. The sound of the metal latch clicking into place was small, but it landed hard. Claire. She stopped. Who are they? Her eyes lowered, then lifted again. People who don't like losing control. That was not an answer. It was worse. A hard knock struck the front door. Not a customer's knock. Not uncertain. Official. The bell gave a thin, ugly jolt. Ethan walked toward it, but Claire caught his wrist before he reached the handle. Her hand was cold. Not trembling now. Past trembling. If they ask for me, she said quietly. You never saw me come upstairs. He studied her face. No manipulation. No performance. Just fear held together by discipline. Another knock. Then a voice through the glass. Calm. Male. Used to being obeyed. We're here regarding an occupancy and property complaint. Occupancy. Property. Legal words. Clean words. The kind that carried knives inside them. Ethan pulled free gently and opened the door 2 inches, chain still latched. The man in the gray suit stood beneath the awning with rain beginning again in a fine silver mist. Another man remained by the sedan, watching the building, not the cafe. We received notice, the suited man said, lifting the folder, that someone unauthorized is staying on these premises. If that continues, the business could face a safety citation and temporary closure pending review. There it was. Not a threat to his pride. A threat to the cafe itself. Steam ticked inside the old machine behind him. Rain stitched the alley into a gray curtain, and the men in suits stood just beyond it like a verdict waiting to be signed. The cafe lights glowed warm against the glass, but the warmth did not reach the folder in the taller man's hand. A safety citation. Temporary closure. Clean words for a cruel thing. Claire moved first. Don't shut him down for me. The sentence came quiet. Steady. Both men turned toward her. She stepped from behind the counter with a dish towel still in one hand. Plain sweater sleeves pushed to her wrists, chin lifted just enough to show she was done hiding behind Ethan's kindness. The smell of coffee grounds and wet wool hung in the room. Somewhere in the back, the old refrigerator buzzed like a tired witness. I'm leaving, she said. Right now. Ethan's jaw tightened. No, the taller man gave a thin, practiced smile. That would simplify matters. Silence settled for half a beat. Then Ethan crossed the floor, took the folder from the man's hand without asking, and read every line under the humming pendant light. Claire watched his face, not the paper. That was where truth lived. They're not citing a person, he said at last. They're fishing. The suited man's smile vanished. A second man near the sedan shifted his weight, one polished shoe scraping wet pavement. Not city inspectors, then. Not exactly. Private pressure in borrowed language. Pressure designed to look official enough to scare a small business owner into surrendering. Claire closed her eyes for one breath. "I'm sorry," she said, but this time it was meant only for Ethan. He folded the notice once. Carefully. "You don't apologize for other people's tactics." The room stilled. Outside, the rain softened. Inside, something changed that had nothing to do with law and everything to do with trust. Claire looked at him as if she had been standing on a ledge for months and had just realized the ground might still hold. The men left with no goodbye, only the slick sound of tires moving through rainwater and the echo of unfinished intent. Ethan locked the door behind them, slid the deadbolt into place, and stood with one hand resting against the glass. Claire waited. So did the quiet. By closing time, the city had blurred into silver reflections on the sidewalk. He wiped the last table in slow circles while Claire stacked cups near the sink. The smell of burnt sugar from the morning pastries still clung faintly to the air, mixed now with lemon cleaner and steam gone cold. "You knew they weren't inspectors right away," he said. "I hoped I was wrong. But you weren't." "No," he set the rag down. "Who sends people like that?" Claire stared at the row of upside-down cups. "The kind who never ask twice when money can ask for them." That was not an answer. It was a bruise shaped like one. He should have pushed. He didn't. Dignity has a sound, and that night it sounded like a man refusing to take from a woman what fear had not yet let her give. Instead, he said, "You were ready to walk out. I was ready to keep your life from shrinking because I came near it." A tired laugh escaped him, but there was no humor in it. Too late for that. She looked up fast, wounded by the possibility she had ruined something. Then he shook his head. "I mean the good part." The faucet dripped once. Twice. Claire let out a breath that trembled on the way free. "You should not be this kind to me, Ethan." "Why?" "Because it makes a person remember what she's been missing." There it was. Not a confession. Nearer than that. Dangerous because it was true. He leaned against the counter, hands flat on the worn wood. "My wife used to say loneliness gets louder in decent places." Claire's expression softened at once. "You still talk to her?" "In my head." He glanced toward the apartment stairs. "Sometimes out loud when the day gets mean." The rain let up just enough for the city to breathe, leaving the windows silvered and the sidewalk slick under the street lamp glow. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Below, the old refrigerator buzzed like a tired witness who had heard too much and could not leave. Claire came down holding a small metal key and a paper envelope that had yellowed at the edges. Her face had that stillness people wore when they had stopped deciding whether to run. She did not sit right away. She placed both things on the counter between the sugar jar and the cracked porcelain saucer Ethan used for loose change. "I need you to look at something." He glanced at the envelope first. No stamp. No address. Just a seal, broken once and pressed flat again, as if someone had read it in fear and hidden it in shame. The paper smelled faintly of perfume and old paper, expensive and distant, nothing like the roasted beans and floor cleaner in the cafe. "You found that upstairs?" "I kept it with me." Her voice stayed even. "Too long." Outside, tires hissed through puddles. Inside, the silence gathered. Ethan opened the letter carefully. The first page was typed on heavy stationery with the company name at the top. He recognized it once. Not from television. From the newspaper abandoned every morning by the hardware store owner next door. A national holding company. Hotels, real estate, shipping. The kind of money that changed skylines. His eyes moved lower. Claire's name. Not scribbled in passing. Not guessed. Written into legal language. Beneficiary. Emergency authority. Temporary transfer restrictions, pending medical review. He looked up. "This is real." "I know. Why didn't you tell me?" Her fingers tightened around the little key. "Because real things can still be used to lie." That landed harder than any confession. He read the second page. There was mention of a private recovery facility. A contested guardianship filing. A recommendation that all direct access be suspended for Claire's own protection. The phrase repeated twice, too polished to trust. For her own protection. For her own protection. The espresso machine clicked as it cooled. You were kept somewhere. I was persuaded. She gave a thin, tired smile. That's how wealthy people describe a locked door when they don't want it to sound criminal. He set the pages down, but not gently. Those men outside. They're not trying to help you. No, are they family? A beat passed. Then another. One of them works for people who call themselves family when cameras are on. There it was. Enough truth to shatter the old question. Not enough to build a safe answer. Ethan reached for the key. What does this open? A deposit box. At a bank. Yes. And what's inside? Her eyes met his, direct now, stripped of fog and apology. Something they need before I can disappear again. The room seemed to narrow around that sentence. Not mystery anymore. Stakes. He exhaled slowly. Then tomorrow we go to the bank. No, the word came fast. Sharp. If they see you with me there, they'll do more than threaten the cafe. He went still. The threat had changed shape. Not rent. Not gossip. Leverage. Claire slid the envelope back toward him. You've already been kind enough to lose business, sleep, and peace. I won't let them take the rest because of me. That's not your call. It has to be. She turned as if to leave, then stopped at the foot of the apartment stairs. Her hand rested on the rail, pale under the pendant light. There's one more thing. He said nothing. My last name is attached to money. A lot of it. Enough to make decent people nervous and bad people patient. She swallowed. But the person who built it didn't trust the people holding it now. Ethan stared at the letter again. The paper had weight. So did the quiet around it. How much money? Claire gave a sad little laugh with no joy in it. Enough that if this gets into the wrong hands, they won't need to buy your building. Morning came with the hiss of the espresso machine, the scent of scorched beans, and the brittle calm that often arrives before bad news learns the address. Outside, delivery trucks rattled past the curb. Inside, the cafe held its breath. Claire was already downstairs when Ethan unlocked the pastry case. She had tied her hair back with the same plain black ribbon she always used, but something in her posture had changed overnight. Not pride, not fear alone. Recognition. The kind a person wears when hiding is no longer protection, only delay. You should leave, she said quietly. Ethan slid 2 mugs onto the counter. That's not a good morning. It's the honest one. He poured coffee anyway. Dark. Steady. Familiar. Honest can sit down. For a second, her mouth almost softened. Then the bells above the front door gave a sharp metallic shake. 3 people entered at once. Not customers. The first wore a charcoal suit too expensive for the neighborhood and a silver watch that flashed each time his wrist moved. The second carried a leather portfolio tucked under one arm. The third never removed his sunglasses, though the morning was gray and the cafe lights were dim. Their shoes clicked across the old tile with the cold rhythm of a decision already made. Claire went still. There are silences that comfort and silences that accuse. This one did neither. It measured. The man with the watch looked directly at her. Claire. No greeting. No surprise. Just possession, sharpened into a voice. Ethan stepped out from behind the counter before she could answer. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just enough to place wood, ceramic, and his own body between the room he had built and the world arriving to claim someone inside it. We're not open for another 20 minutes, he said. The man barely glanced at him. This doesn't concern you. That is what power says when it expects the poor to step aside. Claire lifted her chin. Then why are you here in person? The portfolio opened with a quiet snap. Papers slid free. Legal stationery. Seals. Signatures. The language of polished aggression. You disappeared with restricted documents, the woman said. You interfered with fiduciary control, evaded protective oversight, and exposed yourself to criminal liability. We're here to correct this privately. Ethan heard every word and trusted none of them. Claire's eyes did not leave the papers. Protective oversight? The man smiled without warmth. Your grandfather is gone. The board has obligations. You were never equipped to handle the estate. This little vanishing act has already embarrassed people who matter. Something old and wounded moved across her face then. Not shock. Confirmation. So this was the shape of the secret. Not stolen money. Not a lie invented in hunger. A war over who would control a fortune, now standing between the sugar jars and the morning muffins. Ethan set one hand on the counter. She said no. The woman turned toward him at last, her expression flattening into professional pity. Sir, if you are housing her, you may be exposing yourself to civil consequences. This property can be tied up by injunction before noon. There it was. A new price. Not gossip. Not suspicion. Loss. The cafe. The apartment above it. The last piece of his life that still answered to his name. Claire heard it too. He saw it in the way her shoulders drew in, as if she had been struck somewhere no bruise could show. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out the folded letter from upstairs, and set it on the counter between the coffee cups. No, she said. The man with the watch laughed once, low and impatient. You are in no position to bargain. I'm not bargaining. Her voice grew stronger with each word. You told everyone I was unstable because I asked questions. You moved accounts. You buried instructions. And now you came here because you know I didn't run empty-handed. The sunglasses man took one step forward. Ethan moved before thought had time to dress itself. He planted himself between them, jaw tight, hands open at his sides. The cafe door gave a hard little rattle in its frame, then settled into a silence so thin it could tear. Steam drifted from the espresso wand. Burnt coffee hung in the air. Dust floated through a stripe of gray morning light, and for one suspended second, nobody moved. Then Claire did. Step back, Ethan. Her voice was not louder. It was steadier. That changed everything. He glanced at her over one shoulder, still blocking the narrow path between the counter and the front tables. The sunglasses man kept his stare fixed on Claire, but the confidence in his posture had shifted. He had expected fear. He had expected a woman cornered in borrowed clothes above a small cafe. He had not expected command. Claire reached into the canvas bag she had kept close for days, the one she never let out of sight. The zipper sounded unnaturally loud. She pulled out a slim leather folder, worn at the corners but expensive in the way true power often is, quiet, unadvertised, impossible to fake. You've pushed this far enough, she said. My name is Claire. I am the controlling beneficiary of Halcyon Ventures, Halcyon Foundation, and every holding company you moved money through while telling the board I was too unstable to sign my own name. The room went still. Outside, a truck backed up with a shrill beep beep beep. Inside, the only sound was the low electrical hum of the pastry case. The sunglasses man let out one sharp breath. You disappeared. No, Claire said. I was isolated. She laid the folder on the counter and opened it with careful hands. Inside were notarized copies, bank transfer records, trust amendments, board correspondence, and a sealed letter with a signature across the flap. Ethan did not understand all of it, but he understood the look on the other man's face. It was the look of someone watching a locked door swing open from the inside. They used my grief, Claire said. After my father died, I started asking why philanthropic funds were being rerouted. Why shell companies were billing us for work that never existed. Why my signature appeared on approvals I never saw. So they had doctors paid by men like him write words like exhausted, unstable, emotional. Just enough to discredit me. Not enough to look cruel. The sunglasses man tried to recover. You can't prove coercion from a hiding place above a coffee shop. Claire almost smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I don't need to prove it from here. I already sent the proof. That landed harder than a shout. Ethan turned slightly. To who? The SEC. The State Attorney General. 3 board members who still have a conscience. Claire lifted the sealed letter. And to the bank holding emergency authority over the trust, if I invoked this. The man lunged for the folder. This time, Ethan did not rescue her by force. He didn't have to. Claire pulled one page free and held it up before the man could touch it. Take one more step, and the injunction activates early. He froze. The stillness in the cafe changed shape. It was no longer fear. It was leverage. You vanished because you were scared, he said, but now the words sounded smaller. I vanished, Claire answered, because if they found me before I found the records, they would finish what reputation damage started. They wanted my name without my will attached to it. A living signature. Nothing more. The sunglasses came off at last. His eyes looked older than the rest of him. From somewhere down the block, a siren wailed, then grew louder. Claire slid the leather folder toward Ethan, not as a plea, but as trust. You let me stay when I had nothing to offer you. You gave me a room, coffee, and the dignity of not asking for a performance in return. So now you should know the truth. I'm not broke. I'm not lost. And I'm not theirs. Red and blue light began to flicker across the front window. The man heard it too. You called the police? No, Claire said. No, Claire said again, and this time her voice carried no fear at all. I called my security team. The man by the door stiffened. So did the one in sunglasses. For a breath, nobody moved. The siren outside cut off. Car doors slammed. Shoes struck wet pavement with fast, disciplined purpose. Then the cafe door opened, and 3 men in dark suits stepped in beside a woman in a charcoal coat, silver hair pinned cleanly at her neck, rain shining on her shoulders like glass. The room changed. Not louder. Smaller. The woman looked at Claire first. Not at Ethan. Not at the men who had come to corner her. Just Claire. Her eyes softened with the kind of relief that does not perform for strangers. There you are, she said. One of the men, near the counter, tried to recover his swagger. Ma'am, this is a private financial matter. It is attempted coercion, the silver-haired woman said, crisp as a blade. And you are standing in a business with 3 security cameras, 1 street-facing traffic camera, and a witness you badly underestimated. Her gaze moved to Ethan then. It did not pass over him. It rested. It respected. Claire placed one hand on the leather folder. They wanted signatures, she said quietly. Control transfers. Emergency authority. They started spreading stories the week I disappeared. Ethan looked at her, then at the folder, then back at the men who had treated his small cafe like a place too humble to matter. The smell of coffee and rain hung between them. The old refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the kitchen, a spoon settled against ceramic with a tiny click. One of the suited men took a step backward. The sunglasses man did not. He lifted his chin. If she has money, then she can settle this in court. Claire's expression never changed. I already did. The silver-haired woman opened her coat and pulled out a tablet. One touch. One screen. A string of documents appeared. Injunctions, board votes frozen, emergency filings accepted just before close of business, all time-stamped. Claire had not vanished in confusion. She had stepped away long enough to see who would expose themselves. And they had. Quietly, completely, on camera. The man in sunglasses seemed to understand all at once. Not just that he had lost. Worse than that. He had revealed himself in a place built on grace. In front of the one person Claire had chosen to trust when she had every reason not to trust anyone. That was the humiliation, not handcuffs. Truth. Local police came in a moment later, slower now, because the danger had already changed shape. Statements were taken. Names were written. One of the men began talking too much, then stopped when he heard his own voice shaking. Ethan answered what was asked. Nothing more. He did not grandstand. He did not demand apologies. Dignity rarely raises its voice when justice is finally doing its work. By the time the officers led the 2 men outside, the rain had softened to a hush against the windows. Blue and red light faded from the glass. The cafe felt suddenly tired, like a body after surviving something it had not trained for. Claire exhaled and sat down at the nearest table. For the first time that night, she looked human before she looked powerful. Not broken, just spent. Ethan poured fresh coffee into 2 mugs without asking how she took it. He set one in front of her and kept the other in his hands for warmth. The silver-haired woman and the security team gave them distance, moving toward the back as if they understood that some moments should not be crowded. Claire touched the mug but did not drink. "I built a company people like to write about," she said. "Everyone admires the headline version. Very few survive the real one." Ethan leaned against the chair across from her. "You could have told me." "I know." Steam rose between them. "I didn't tell you because the second people know, they begin measuring themselves around you.